One worm species eats your garbage and turns it into the most powerful fertilizer on Earth. Its castings have 10 to 20 times more microbial activity than the surrounding soil. Cleopatra made removing these worms from Egypt punishable by death. That's how valuable they were. In the floodplains of ancient Egypt, the value of earthworms was recorded centuries before chemical fertilizers existed. Middle Kingdom papyri, dating to around 1500 BCE, describe farmers spreading the mud of the field after the flood, mixed with the little white threads that the earth sends up. Scholars now identify these threads as worm-rich soil, deliberately gathered to renew exhausted plots. Another inscription from the reign of Sesostris III calls earthworms the muscles of the earth, instructing workers to return this living layer to fields for better harvests. Yet, as modern historians confirm, no surviving law from Cleopatra's reign mentions a death penalty for harming worms. The story of her edict, often repeated in popular accounts, appears only in medieval Arabic texts and 19th century retellings, with no legal document or temple inscription to support it. Across the Mediterranean, Aristotle described earthworms as the intestines of the soil, noting their role in digesting and enriching earth for plant growth. His passages in Historia Animalium offer the earliest scientific explanation of how worms transform waste into humus, a concept that would not be measured in laboratories for another 2,000 years. In China, Song dynasty agronomists wrote manuals on haitao, the cultivation of what they called silkworms of the earth. Farmers were advised to collect and rebury these worms after the monsoon, treating them as essential partners in rice and vegetable farming. Sanskrit hymns from the Rig Veda, composed between 1500 and 1200 BCE, praise the earth's worms that turn the dark earth, while later medical texts blend recipes for soil medicine with the use of earthworms as organic amendments. Classical historians and modern experts agree the oldest surviving evidence for worm-based soil management comes from Egypt, but practical guidance appears in Chinese and Indian sources as well. The myth of Cleopatra's decree is folklore, not fact. What remains clear is that, for thousands of years, civilizations recognized worms as agents of fertility, long before the rise of synthetic alternatives. A soil microbiologist sets out to test the claims. The first step is a closed-jar respirometry assay, a direct measure of microbial metabolism. After 24 hours, vermicompost samples release 3 times more carbon dioxide than synthetic fertilizer, confirming a surge in living activity. A fluorescent diacetate hydrolysis test follows, quantifying enzyme production. The vermicompost clocks in at 4.2 micrograms per gram per hour, nearly quadruple the mineral control. On culture plates, nitrogen-free agar reveals a 12-fold increase in diazotrophic colonies, Azotobacter and Rhizobium, thriving in the castings compared to the agricultural soil. Molecular analysis deepens the evidence. Quantitative PCR, targeting the NIFH gene, a marker for nitrogen fixation, shows a 2.6 log increase in copy number per gram of vermicompost. The DNA data align with amplicon sequencing, which identifies a community shift. Azospirillum, Bacillus, and Pseudomonas fluorescens now make up nearly a quarter of the microbiome, a 5-fold jump over plots treated with synthetic fertilizer alone. Spectroscopy adds another layer. FTIR scans reveal strong peaks for carboxylate and phenolic groups in the worm castings, chemical signatures of humic substances that bind nutrients and slow their release. In a side-by-side incubation, 45% of total nitrogen in the castings mineralizes over a week, with the remainder released gradually across 3 months. By contrast, urea fertilizer dumps 90% of its nitrogen in just 3 days. The final test is a greenhouse plant trial. Tomato seedlings grown in vermicompost amended soil show a 15% increase in shoot dry weight, with root colonization by Azotobacter up 70% over the sterile control. Statistical analysis confirms the results. P-values below 0.05, effect sizes beyond anything observed for store-bought fertilizer. The evidence is clear. Vermicompost is not just an organic alternative. It is a living system, regenerating itself, delivering nutrients slowly, and supporting a web of microbes that synthetic blends cannot match. The post-war decades brought a transformation to American agriculture that few anticipated. By 1950, the Haber-Bosch process had scaled to deliver millions of tons of cheap nitrogen. flooding the market with ammonia-based fertilizers. Archival ads from this era, filed in the Fertilizer Institute's bulletins, boasted slogans like "Modern Farm," "Modern Fertilizer," and "Feed the Future," with nitrogen power. The message was clear. Synthetic inputs were not just a tool, but the very symbol of progress. An agricultural historian traces the policy levers that made this shift possible. USDA's extension pamphlets, distributed to every county agent, prescribed precise doses of ammonium sulfate, triple superphosphate, and potash, relegating organic matter and worm castings to a footnote or an afterthought. Soil test bulletins from the 1960s focused on NPK numbers, with recommendations tied to branded products. By 1965, the average US farm applied 9 times more nitrogen per acre than in 1945, while manure and compost use flatlined. Federal price supports ensured that synthetic fertilizer stayed affordable. The Farm Service Agency offered low-interest loans explicitly for the purchase of chemical inputs, and extension curricula rewrote the rules of soil management. Where pre-war textbooks had included chapters on earthworms and humus, post-war editions replaced them with tables of application rates and yield curves. The result was a constructed dependency. Farmers were told that higher yields required more product, and the living fertility, once built by worms, was quietly written out of the official record. The disappearance of vermiculture was neither accident nor oversight. It was the outcome of coordinated marketing, policy, and curriculum, all reinforcing the idea that only synthetic fertilizers could guarantee prosperity. The regenerative loop of waste to fertility, once common knowledge, faded from view, replaced by a system that demanded ever more inputs, year after year. A permaculture grower stands over a simple bin, hands dusted with the damp, dark bedding that signals a thriving ecosystem. Kitchen scraps, fruit peels, coffee grounds, shredded paper disappear beneath a layer of moist, carbon-rich bedding. This is the feedstock, the same household waste that in another system would rot in landfill and release methane. Here, it becomes the raw material for a closed-loop process that needs no synthetic input and generates no toxic residue. Red wiggler worms, Eisenia fetida, convert this mixture into 2 distinct products. The first is solid castings, fine, granular material, rich in humus, slow-release nutrients, and a dense population of beneficial microbes. The second is a liquid leachate, often called worm tea, which drains through the bedding and can be diluted for use as a foliar spray or soil drench. Each output plays a different role. Castings amend the soil, building structure and fertility over time, while the tea delivers a pulse of microbial life and soluble nutrients directly to plant roots. Maintaining this system is straightforward, but precise. The bedding must balance carbon and nitrogen, 3 parts shredded paper or cardboard to 1 part kitchen waste, creating a final C to N ratio around 25:1. Moisture is critical. The bedding should feel like a wrung-out sponge, holding about 60 to 70% water. Aeration prevents anaerobic pockets. Perforated bins or vented lids ensure a steady flow of oxygen. Overfeeding or adding meat, dairy, or greasy foods risks collapse, but with steady attention, a single bin can process up to 200 kilograms of waste per year, transforming garbage into a regenerative resource. This is not just composting. It is a living system, powered by organisms that multiply and renew themselves, producing a steady supply of high-value fertilizer without the risk of plant burn or salt buildup. In contrast to the linear extractive model of synthetic inputs, the household vermicompost loop diverts waste, closes nutrient cycles, and restores the logic of soil as a living community. A well-run worm bin operates on reliable numbers. Red wigglers consume 1.5 times their body weight in food scraps each day. That means a starter colony of 8 mature worms, under ideal conditions, can multiply to over 1,500 adults in just 6 months. Temperature and moisture are critical. Worms thrive between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius, with bedding that stays as damp as a wrung-out sponge. Too much water suffocates the bin. Too little water stores the entire ecosystem. Population growth follows a 90-day doubling cycle, but overfeeding or letting the bedding dry out can trigger collapse. Avoid meat, dairy, and oily foods because they invite pests and rot. A single 30-litre bin managed with this checklist can divert up to 200 kilograms of kitchen waste per year. With steady attention to feed rate, moisture and aeration, the system becomes as dependable as any appliance in the home. A single community worm bin can offset nearly 70% of commercial fertilizer use for the average grower. In practical terms, this means that most household or small farm participants report buying only a fraction of what they once did. Soil tests confirm the difference. Electrical conductivity remains stable, with no sign of the salt buildup that plagues synthetic fertilizer regimes. After 3 years of vermicompost application, a local soil scientist found no increase in electrical conductivity across dozens of gardens, evidence that the living system does not accumulate harmful residues. Meanwhile, waste audits show a single bin diverts up to 200 kilograms of kitchen scraps from landfill every year, directly reducing methane emissions. Community programs that train residents in vermicomposting report not only waste reduction, but measurable gains in soil health and local food yields. The closed-loop model stands in sharp contrast to the extractive, linear pattern of synthetic inputs, offering tangible proof that a forgotten technology can deliver economic savings, ecological resilience, and a path out of chemical dependency. Today, regenerative vermiculture remains largely sidelined, even as synthetic fertilizers dominate, locking us into cycles of chemical dependence and mounting soil decline. The science is clear. Worm castings build fertility without risk or waste. The real question now isn't what works, it's why we keep ignoring what's always worked. Share your thoughts below.